I am the last of a breed. What we have here is a stinky 4-day-old cow head that has brains inside of it. The mountain man and the Indians figured out that brains, the oils in the brains, will tan a hide. Like, how do you even come to that conclusion in the first place? Hey, I'm gonna put brains on the hide. Well, if you want to be a big, stubborn, dumb mountain man like me, you use a hatchet. But if you actually want to be a little cleaner, I suggest a hacksaw. Brain. There are a few different ways you can skin an otter. You can split him up his tail all the way to his chin, and then you have like an otter rug, or you tube them out. You split them, you Y them at the back legs, and then peel it all down. I'm gonna peel it just in case, who knows, I don't know what I want to do with this. You can always split it later. It's a lot harder to sew it back up. You're gonna want a smaller knife, but it's gotta be sharp. You don't wanna have to saw through the hide, because then you're gonna risk cutting a lot more. The sharper your knife is, believe it or not, the less you're gonna cut the hide. It's easier to get to when you hang it up once you split it. Then you can use leverage. You know, when you're skinning it to tan it for hide purposes, you just cut the feet off. You don't need, you know, some people will try to skin it out because they think the claws are cool. It's not worth it. So you can see, I wide it right here, split him down the tail, cut from that ankle to this ankle, and then I'll just peel it all the way down, like peeling a banana. You can see I've peeled him all the way down. I got his front shoulders and then his head. Once I get past the front shoulders, because otters have pretty wide shoulders, I can peel it right off his head. You know, when they're fresh, it's a lot easier. You can just put pressure and it'll just strip it right down. But this one was in the freezer for a little while, so I don't want to risk ripping the hide or damaging it in any way. So I'll take that extra few minutes to just skin it out. You can see right here, you just find that shoulder, just kind of skin around, and once you can get in, you can literally just pull it. And then, like I talked about the back feet, you just cut it around his ankles and tube it right out. You know, if you're selling it for fur, the head doesn't matter. You just peel the head right off. But if you want to do like a rug or something cool, then you have to cut around the ears and the eyes and all the way down, cut his gums off. That way that you take it to a taxidermist and they can actually do something with it. This otter was a little tougher to skin than the average one, just because I didn't get to it in a real timely manner. But you see all this fat and gristle and meat. You want to go take that and flesh it, and you want to get all that off to where it's down. I'll show you, but you know, it's down right to the hide. So this is where brain tanning starts to get very physical. You have to scrape. You look right there. That's what I want all the hide to be down to. Get all the fat and gristle and that first little layer of membrane. You get all that off. That way that brain, once you apply it, will soak into the hide. You just got to keep going until you can get all, you got a whole layer of meat and fat and, you know, nasty stuff on there that you have to get off before you can apply any brain. If you don't get that off, that's going to rot, it'll ruin the hide. You know, all I got here, just a draw knife. You can get a draw knife anywhere. They sell them specifically for just fleshing. This one's actually for wood, but it'll do the same thing. You know, this hide got really, really wet. It's been raining for a couple of days, plus it was frozen. So I let it dry for about an hour after I skinned it, but as you can tell, it's still really wet underneath. So I might have to let it dry. I might have to flip it inside out and let it dry just a little more, because when it's sloppy and nasty like that, and you see my draw knife, it's just getting gunked up. So, and you know, the craziest thing is that every animal has enough brain to tan its own hide. The one rule with brain tanning is you can never have too much brain. All it's gonna do, the more brain you put on it, the softer and the more flexible that hide will be. So you just apply it very generously, and you want to mix one brain with about a gallon of water. So the brain has oils in it that penetrate that hide, and it penetrates and it gets in between all your little follicles, and it makes it to where it's pliable, so they stretch. You know, the difference between rawhide and leather is the breakdown of the hide, but not breaking down as far as rotting. It's breaking down the follicles to where they don't come together and harden, they flex. And that's all you're trying to do here. This is the next step. I've already applied the brain, I rolled it up, I let it sit. Now you've got to stretch it, and stretch it until it dries. And then I'll keep putting more brain on. You can do this up to 20 times or even more. Like I said before, you can never have too much brain on a hide. But what I've got is I've got a cable tied in between these two trees. Look how pliable it is already getting, just from that brain soaking in. You know, you can see right there, it's soaking in to the membrane of that hide. And that's what you want. It's just repetition, and you want to move it in all different ways. You know, turn it, you can twist it. You want to try to stretch that hide as much as you possibly can. Stretching and flushing are your two most important parts. The reason is, if you don't stretch it enough to get that brain to penetrate it, this hide is going to harden right back up. It won't stay pliable. So when you're stretching it, you're just trying to get as much of that brain inside the hide, so into all the little follicles and the membrane on this hide, so that it doesn't allow it to harden up, because it'll harden up and turn into rawhide if you don't stretch it enough, or you don't put enough brain on it, you didn't flush it good enough. It's a long, tedious process, but it's so worth it in the end. So when you're doing this, a lot of people ask, well, when do I know I'm done? The end game is you want this hide to dry and still be pliable. You don't want any hard spots. You want it all to still be pliable and stretchy, just like it is right there. You want it to dry that way. So if you look, this is what you don't want it to look like. This is what you want it to look like. You can see that brain is penetrating the skin. Here, it's not. So I need to get a little more of this membrane off. You can see the membrane starting to roll up because of the cable. Well, we brained it a few times, stretched it. I just added another coat of brains. I'm gonna let it sit for a little bit and stretch it again. And then it should be ready to be smoked. The next step and the last step is you get you a bunch of rotten wood, and you start a fire and you put that rotten wood on it because it's going to smoke really good. I'll turn this inside out and I'll put it over to where that smoke comes right up through the tube, and you let that smoke for a couple, 3-4 hours. And what it does is it penetrates the skin and it waterproofs, so it holds it all in there, so when it gets wet, that brain doesn't wash out. Turn it inside out. It's time for the last step of the process. I'm going to get a couple of sticks and prop this bottom open, and then I'm going to set it over the top of that smoke and let it sit there for as long as I can. And like I said before, what it'll do is it'll waterproof the whole inside of that. That way, if it ever gets wet, it won't harden back up again. The smoke's rolling through that good. I'm finally done. I'm gonna let this smoke for a while, but you know what time it is? It's time to go fishing.